Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we are going to take a look at a game, kind of a goodie blast from the past. I've had it for a while now, called Victory or Death, the Peloponnesian War by Ian Brody. Now this is a game in the series of the Quartermaster General series. Now the Quartermaster General series is a series wherein you're not necessarily dealing with the frontline units, armies, dudes on a map fighting across control. You're dealing with supply lines and sort of wooden influences placed around a map. It's a different switch of your mind. You're dealing, supply lines are the game rather than the thing you check like on step 5 of 6, like in your typical war game. Victory or Death is not a simple translation that just says, let's just throw some Peloponnesian lore here. And so what you'll have instead is an interesting idea of 4 different sides in 2 different teams. The Corinthians, the Delians, the Athenians, and the Spartans, all vying for influence in ultimately victory points across the landscape of ancient Greece. How's it going to play? Let's take a look.
Alright, let's take a look at what is in every box of Victory or Death. You get this map of the battlefield, the area of ancient Greece that we will be fighting over. There's a victory point track, which goes from 0 to 75, and there is the scoring track. So each round, you're going to be taking a turn and then going to the next round, etc. There are scoring phases after every 3 rounds within a final round. Every side has their own custom deck of cards, and these are the action cards you'll be using for the course of the game. You'll also have your own set of triremes, ships, hoplites, and cities, as well as bribery tokens, which will be described later. Again, each of the 4 sides is going to have their own set of units, all slightly different, and every player is going to get their own custom player aid card depending on which of the powers they're going to play: Corinth, Delian League, Sparta, or Athens. You will be given this, the rules are pretty much the same, although if you want to look in the back and see kind of what your capabilities are, for this example, the Delian League, that's the yellow guys here. And everybody starts off with the same configuration on the map with a very small amount of units, and draw 10 cards. Pick 7 of those cards you want to use, the other 3 are discarded, and then, well, that's it. So let's get into play. So let's begin. The order is very important. Corinth always goes first, followed by the Delian League, followed by Sparta, and finally by Athens. I had them counterclockwise ordered, so this will be a little simplified. On your turn, you must follow these steps in the sequence. The strategy step is when you play any prepare cards, and I should go over that, but let me explain. Prepare cards are cards you play 1 turn ahead in the hopes that you will be able to play them in the next or future turns. Prepare cards are very important. This is how you sort of build multi-step activities that really can change the difference between war and success and war and failure. Right now, in the strategy step, there's absolutely nothing to do because we don't have any bribery tokens, which I'll explain later, and we don't have any any prepared cards. So basically, for everyone, turn 1, the strategy step is ignored. Second, you play 1 of your cards, and you can play any card you want. Usually, this is where you want to play action cards, but you can also prepare a card in advance. Looking at this, you then play an event. Well, let's play this one. I like this event. Events are one-time triggers. You trigger them and they're done. Sea battles are basically using your ships to battle an adjacent space. We'll go over that. Muster Hoplite will let you actually put a unit on the map using the supply rules. Supply is very important. And Muster Trireme, of course, ships. And then you prepare cards, which we'll go over later. But for now, we're going to play this event. This event says, if Athens... Ooh, man, that's blurry. If Athens does not have a piece in Attica, Athens must discard 4 cards from its draw deck. And when you run out of cards in this game, you basically are kind of like losing victory points every turn until the game is over. So you don't like to... Athens is not going to like this, but the reality is it doesn't have a piece in Attica, so it has to basically discard 4 cards. Note that only the top card is revealed in your discard deck. That will keep people from trying to guess what cards are discarded. Card counting bad. Okay, now we're done with that. Now you have an optional step, the only optional step, which is to prepare any future card, but it will cost you having to discard a card. We're going to prepare this card here. This card says that if I do, in my next strategy step, if there's a friendly hoplite, a bribery token in Syracuse, which currently there is not, then I can place a city there, and that would be good, because Corinth right now is purple, and there's not a ton there. In a couple turns, it could be exposed if it doesn't reinforce Corinth, because battle's very easy here. If someone battles you, you're going to lose whatever they battled. This is as simple as it gets. So prepare cards go here, upside down, and one of these cards must be discarded. We'll discard. We'll just do this for sea battle. Okay. And that's it. Then a supply step. You have to check all of your units and note supply. Supply is, well, it took me a while to get my head around, but basically, if you have a unit, a land unit, it has to be adjacent to another one of your pieces contiguously. It can also be separated across seas, but as long as you can actually trace either an empty sea that has a land piece in it. It's really weird, but you get used to it. But effectively, yeah, you can go across empty seas as long as there's no enemies in it, as long as there's an adjacent land piece on the sea. In this case, it's really easy. The land pieces all connect up for them. But this is what we're checking. So the trireme is right next to a city and is in siege adjacent to a city, one of my pieces. If there was a land piece there, that would count as well. There you go. And that's it for Corinth. So Corinth takes its cards. It now has 4 cards. And it's going to draw back up to 7. All right. And then we'll wait for its next turn. Now, we're going to go on to the Delian League next. They, too, don't have any strategy cards to play out, so they're going to take a look at what they're going to do. In this case, I think right now they don't have any land units and they don't have much of a sea presence. They could muster a trireme, but the reality is when you muster, you have a much more stringent set of supply rules. You have to be able to go back to your city, not your friendly city, because note that Corinth and Sparta are friends, so they're not fighting against each other. They can team up, but when you're supplying, you can actually go through your teammates' supply locations, and that's great. Except when you're mustering. When you're mustering, putting a piece out for the first time, it is only your cities that count. And so in this case, right now, with that one city, mustering a trireme means that they could perhaps go here, but you can't have your own piece. Only your teammates' piece can be in there. So only one of your pieces in any spot at any time. And that's not very valuable. Now, for kicks, let's do this. That doesn't work either. So, yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to plan ahead for the future. We're going to take this event that probably won't happen, and we're going to place a bribery token here. That means that we can use that for supply. Bribery is basically a way to kind of connect the supply line in places where you have gaps. The problem is it only lasts for a turn. When it's over, you either have to keep bribing them, or you have to be able to somehow configure your forces to be able to have the pieces needed to form a supply line. Because if your units are out of supply, they're gone, and that can be devastating to your strategy. So we'll do that, and that can happen at any time. Bribery on your turn, you can do that at any time. You can buy them and spend them. So on our turn, we're going to prepare. Because we're not using the prepare step, we can just prepare without having to pay the extra card. And that leaves us 5 cards. So we're going to draw up to 7. And that's the end of our turn. We didn't seemingly do much, but, oh well, life goes on. And I'm not saying I'm playing the best strategy either. This is mostly just for demonstration purposes. So here we're at Sparta. And what is Sparta going to do? Well, Sparta it has some ideas. It has some interesting strategies. So we're gonna play this card, but we're gonna do that as part of the prepare stage. So the first thing is strategy. Don't have any strategy cards. Next is the play step. So I can muster a hoplite, which might not be my best. I'm actually gonna muster a trireme. That I am. So we'll go ahead and discard that and muster a trireme. There aren't too many for Sparta. Put it here. Now there's some contention. Yes, there is. Then I have the optional ability to prepare a card if I want to discard a card. I'm going to prepare this card and discard this card to pay for it. That's right. And then back to 4. So now I draw back up to 7. You see how quickly these are going. Getting some interesting cards here. And that's the end of Sparta's turn. Now it's Athens. Athens as well is going to look and decide what it's going to do. Athens, it has some curious gameplay things too that it needs to prepare for. So this is really important. So we're going to strategy phase. We're going to skip that. We're going to play this card. This card says that if Athens is battled, do not remove a city. That's very important. So that's going to be there waiting to be used. So if any the enemy nations come and attack Athens and there wasn't a piece there, basically as long as there's a piece here, the city's safe. But here by itself, if any of these were ever to get close and attack it and remove the city, it becomes very prohibitive to come back because you really need your cities. So we played that. Now we have an option to do our optional prepare step. Yes, you can prepare multiple cards. And in this case, we're going to do a second card, but it's going to cost us a card. So we're gonna pay the price for that card. Then we check supply. Everything is in supply. Nobody's out of supply. And then draw back up to 7. All right. At this point, we have just completed an entire first round of play. So then we extend this, and now it's time for round 2. And we're going to go do this again, and again, and again. Now, I'm not going to go through a continuing saga of more turns. Instead, I'm going to show you kind of spot situations that could happen, or show you a little bit of what each card does instead. So, for example, it's now Corin's turn, starts up again. Do they want to use their prepare card? This says during the strategy phase, these kind of can activate. So during your strategy, if there's a friendly hoplite in Syracuse, place a city. There's not, so we don't need to reveal that yet. Same here. So if it was the Delian League's turn and they wanted to use this, they could to muster cities. Basically, these are used to either like hit opportunistic moments and get points, or reaction to area to react to certain things that are happening to you. So let's go over some of the cards. Beyond prepare, these we know mustering rules. So if you muster, say, a trireme, it has to be mustered in such a way that you can have a supply line back to your city. So in this case, for example, if I was to muster here, the rules state that for ships, you have to have some presence, either a bribe token or a land unit or a city somewhere in the very space, and then you work back to each other zone and decide if they're in supply or not. Triremes don't assist you in supply. They're not part of the supply chain. So in this case, we couldn't do it, except I have a bribery token. And because I'm bribing Italy, I'm allowed to actually put my trireme here, and then I work back to here and go, okay, is this zone next to a city or a land unit or a bribery token? Well, it sure is. So I'm in supply, so we're good to go. Once again, at the start of the next turn for the Delian League, this is going to go away. So unless they want to keep paying bribes to keep it in supply, they're going to want to find a way to maybe get Syracuse in the a city or something, because there are 3 cities that the Delian League can actually put out. And we'll leave that there. So what about hoplites? Hoplites, as we talked about, can be, say that they can be anywhere adjacent. So here, yeah, they can be adjacent to and other land units. They have to be next to the land units, though, unlike triremes. They have to be next to another land unit or connected to, directly connected to another land unit on the way to also having to be in the city. I didn't explain that well, sorry. Then we have sea battles. A sea battle is very simple. Say the Delian League instead wanted to do a sea battle, it would take any adjacent enemy trireme and say, yep, sucks to be you, bye-bye. That's as simple as it gets. Combat is very simple here. Also, they can play land battles, so if they're next to a land unit, For example, if this was somehow in this regard, and the trireme wanted to play a battle card, it could remove as well. So triremes can be pretty powerful. Those basically the general gist of all the things you can do. You're going to spend your time preparing cards to do some multi-action moves. You're going to play events that kind of change the game, strip people of cards, cut off supply, and then you're going to have statuses. Statuses are strange. They're kind of like permanent effects that you can play. Let me show you an example of that. Yeah, so the status card would just get played down in a regular fashion, and it usually has a trigger, like if something happens, then you do something with it. And that's really the point of the game. Now, in each scoring turn, you're going to get a point for each city that you control. So, for example, right now, the Delian League and Corinth have 2 cities. They get 2 points. Same thing with Sparta and Corinth. Also, cards, many of the cards have ways that they can trigger extra victory points. So a lot of the extra points you're going to get are through the clever card play. And finally, at the end of the game, in the final scoring round, if you have whoever has control of these special designated regions gets those extra victory points as well. Sparta being a big deal, the rest being less big. But that's basically the game in a nutshell. There are a couple good run-throughs online, particularly ones that go over the supply rules in a bit better, more cohesive detail. But that's a general overview of how you would play Victory or Death, Peloponnesian War, the Quartermaster General series. And so let's get into my final thoughts.
All right, let's get over my thoughts on Victory or Death, the Peloponnesian War. It is absolutely a fast-paced strategy game, no lie. Let's go over the pros first. I do like that you can recreate the Peloponnesian War very simply and yet very meatyfully with this game. The 4 sides are very unique. You're not just getting carte blanche, a few slight tweaks and 4 average sides. Each of the sides has their own motivations. They have their own specialties, and the cards are very much leaning towards whatever that particular nation is intended to do best. They do match sort of the archetypes. You do want Athenians to be ravenous on the waves, and of course Spartans ravenous on land, but the other 2 powers also have their own sort of variety and special, and part of it is the meshing of the cards with the units. Again, this is not a dudes on a map, and so if you go in with that expectation, you're probably going to be a little disappointed. As for cons, I would say that the only thing is just for some reason there is actually it's actually pretty reasonable and pretty simple how you do the supply rules for each unit you place. But for some reason, I kept having to go back and kind of question myself. Like, did I really get the rules right on this one? Did I not? They're empty C spaces are in supply if they're adjacent to specific units, etc. And it all maps out, and it's really not that complicated. But for some reason, that tripped my mind up more than it ought to. I actually spent quite a bit of time just kind of like having to double check myself. And that's one of the things, is that it's just, that's more on me than the game. But just understand that the supply rules, once you understand them, they make sense. You are thinking about how to sprawl your way across the ancient Greek map. The other thing I liked, and I'm kind of mixing pros and cons here, but the other thing I liked is just the way you earn victory points is not altogether entirely just a simple straight up, if you control these units every 3 turns, these locations every 3 turns, you get this many points. Yes, that is a baseline, but a lot of it comes from the card play and that you get the points, the situational cards that say, in this condition, you're going to get this many extra victory points. And that actually means so that the cards are really expressive in earning you victory points beyond just the simple, score some points if you control these parts of the map. I do like that the scoring is only every 3 turns and not every single turn. That was one thing about the original Quartermaster General that I did find we'd forget often. The other thing is I like the preparing aspect, and this is what deviates dramatically from the other games in the Quartermaster series. The big thing is stringing together really cool combos. You're preparing cards, and then you're using abilities to, place a unit. Because you placed a unit, you get to trigger this card, prepare a card, trigger that part. And that's where you build the momentum, because you're making these small, tiny, bite-sized choices, and they don't seem to have a lot of significance. And you could do yourself, great disfavor by just going, hey, I'm going to put this, I want to muster a hoplite so that, it looks like I've got a lot of dudes on the map. You're just opening yourself up for opportunity to have someone else take advantage of that while you don't get the benefit. You really want to be able to plan ahead and really prepare, which is what they did. I mean, Peloponnesian War was not a matter of you're playing this game over the course of days. You're playing it over the course of decades. And so in that regard, the preparation phase makes perfect sense in light of the actual topic being presented. So I was more than impressed with this. I think this is one of the best, fastest Peloponnesian War games. For meatiness, there's always Pericles, the Peloponnesian War from Mark Herman. He also has his one-player game, Peloponnesian War. There's, I believe, an old version of Pericles years ago that did more of a political, diplomatic kind of thing. They all have their place, and I actually deem them highly favored. But Victory or Death is probably the best, fastest, easiest, most entertaining way to get in and sort of recreate the Peloponnesian Wars. Once again, not dudes on a map. This is not Axis and Allies and the Peloponnesian War idea. This is a game unto its own in the Quartermaster series that I think does more than do justice to both the topic and the series. So, recommended. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.